In the fishing town of Capernaum, a house once became a classroom, a clinic, and a courtroom in a single afternoon. Stone walls held heat from the midday sun, and the doorway framed a river of neighbours. Inside, Jesus sat and taught. The room was full enough that breath and whispers felt like a tide, pushing and pulling with every phrase he spoke. People had come for many reasons: to listen, to test, to hope. Some leaned on walking sticks, some leaned on rumours. All of them leaned toward the sound of his voice. Houses in that region were simple and honest. A packed earth roof rested on beams with a staircase along the outer wall. The roof was not just a lid, it was a place for drying figs, for cooling in the evening, for conversation. That day it became a path for 4 men carrying a friend who could not move. A mat was his geography. He had learned the weight of minutes, the slow drift of a day without destinations. Yet his friends refused to let the doorway decide the end of their attempt. They reached the house, saw the press of bodies, and read the situation. The front was closed, the roof was open. Faith often begins with reading the obvious and refusing to stop there. They climbed the stairs, felt the heat in the clay, and began to dig. Not reckless vandalism, careful urgency. They removed tiles, loosened earth, widened the space until daylight pooled on someone else's floor. Dirt fell like confetti on the heads below. Fingers pointed, voices rose. Then a rectangular sky appeared where a ceiling used to be, and a mat began to descend. Everyone stopped. Teachers of the law adjusted their robes for dignity's sake, but curiosity betrayed them. Jesus looked up into the sunlit frame and saw 4 faces, filled with a focus that bordered on stubborn joy. Faith looks like many things. Sometimes it looks like the refusal to carry a friend home disappointed. The mat reached the ground in front of Jesus. The room held its breath. When Jesus saw their faith, he spoke to the man on the mat. "Son, your sins are forgiven." The sentence startled the room because it moved in a direction no one predicted. People had come for a visible miracle, and Jesus began with an invisible one. He did not ignore the paralysis. He addressed the deeper paralysis, the one that locks the soul in debts it cannot pay. In a single breath, he relocated the man's story from shame to sonship. In the corners of the room, thoughts sharpened like knives. The scribes reasoned within themselves, who can forgive sins but God alone? They were not entirely wrong, they were just not ready for the answer. Jesus knew their reflections without a whisper. He asked a question that still slices clean through debate. Which is easier, to say, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, "Rise, take up your mat and walk"? To prove that the first statement was not a slogan, he prepared to perform the second statement as a sign. Here the narrative becomes both tender and thunderous. He turned again to the man. "I say to you, rise, pick up your mat and go home." The words entered the room with authority that did not shout. The man's body listened. Sensation returned like morning light, first at the edges, then everywhere. He sat up. He stood, perhaps surprised by his own height. He rolled the mat that had rolled him. Then he walked through the crowd, which opened like a sea taught to part by awe. People glorified God. Some said they had never seen anything like this. Others carried questions home like sparks in their sleeves. This is the skeleton of the event. It needs muscle and breath to carry meaning into ours. Let us slow down and learn why this house still speaks. First, consider the 4 friends. They do not say a recorded word, but their choices are a language. They loved with logistics. Love does not wait for perfect moments. It engineers openings. They did not ask Jesus to come to the mat. They brought the mat to Jesus. This is intercession with rope burns, prayer with hands, planning as compassion. If you have ever carried someone's name up a staircase of effort and lowered it into God's presence, you have prayed this story. Second, consider the man. He arrives without movement or merit. He brings no argument except proximity to Jesus. He is spoken to before he speaks. He is called son before he can call Jesus Lord. Grace does not wait until you are impressive. It begins where you are pinned. Forgiveness lands before strength returns. New identity precedes new ability. Third, consider the roof. In every generation, a roof forms between possibility and need. It can be the crowd at the door, the rules of a room, the fear of being seen, or the habit of tucking pain out of sight. Faith does not despise roofs, but it does not treat them as sacred when people are suffocating under them. Sometimes the holiest sound is the careful breaking of what keeps mercy out. Fourth, consider authority. The scribes asked the right theological question, and the narrative answers it with a person. Only God can forgive sins. Jesus forgives sins. Conclusion pressed itself into their minds like a tide. The healing was not a magic trick. It was a signpost pointing to the true scandal of the day, that God's authority had arrived in human voice and human touch. The visible miracle authenticated the invisible claim. Fifth, consider community. Faith is personal, but it is rarely solitary. In this story, salvation and healing arrive along lines of relationship, across a roof strengthened by many hands. If your faith feels thin, borrow some from friends who will climb for you. If your friend cannot climb, be the rope holder who refuses to let go halfway. This moment also reframes the order of transformation. Our instinct is to fix the symptom first and the heart later. Jesus moves in the other order. He speaks to guilt before he speaks to muscle. He restores the man not just to walking, but to belonging. Son, your sins are forgiven is the restoration of family, not merely function. Then rise and walk becomes a new vocation. Carry the mat that carried you, a portable testimony rolled under your arm. There is also a quiet lesson about risk. The friends risked embarrassment, interruption charges, perhaps a stern conversation with the homeowner. Love pays small costs gladly when the goal is a life made whole. The scribes risked nothing and learned nothing. Caution has its place. It does not belong on the throne where courage should sit when mercy is at stake. At the midpoint of our reflection, let me invite your partnership. If this episode helps you or someone you love, please like, comment, share and subscribe so more people can find this story and its hope. Now return to the scene. Dust settles, people murmur. A narrow street outside the house fills with neighbours who missed the show but catch the testimony. A man who used to be carried now carries. He is a walking reversal. Every step announces that forgiveness is not theory and healing is not rumour. The rolled mat speaks without words. What defined me no longer confines me. Imagine the homeowner. He glances at the hole and then at the healed man and makes the easiest decision of his life. Some losses are gains in disguise. The roof will be patched. The day will be remembered as the day mercy took priority over plaster. Hospitality matured in holiness when a ceiling became a door. Think about the scribes' inner debate. If only God can forgive sins and this man forgives, then we must either accuse him of blasphemy or bow to his identity. The narrative invites confession without coercion. Jesus does not humiliate them. He reveals himself and lets the room decide. Many of us stand in that same room each day, choosing whether to file Jesus as inspiration, scandal, or Lord. Let's draw out applications without draining the mystery. If you feel paralyzed, not only in body, but in hope, creativity, or faith, bring your mat into his presence. If you cannot carry yourself, let friends carry you. If you are the friend, plan the staircase. Remove what keeps mercy from meeting need. Pray with specificity. Act with gentleness that does not apologize for urgency. And if your struggle is guilt, listen to the order. First identity, then strength. First forgiveness, then motion. You are not a project Jesus begrudgingly accepts. You are a son or daughter he gladly names. Failure may have trained your posture to stare at the floor. His word lifts your chin before it lifts your legs. Walk home carrying the proof that grace arrived first. To those inclined to analysis, the logic of the scene stands firm. A claim that cannot be verified in the invisible is verified by the visible. Jesus ties the two with authority. He does not simply announce pardon, he validates it with power. Authority over sin and authority over sickness arrive in one voice because both are symptoms of a broken world he came to mend. The story also carries a mission shape. The man is told to go home. Testimonies begin where we have history. The first people to see him upright are the people who knew him when he could not stand. Your first assignment after grace is not to become spectacular. It is to become faithful where you live. Carry your mat past old doorways. Let the change you preach without shouting. For those who lead or teach, take the posture of that crowded house to heart. Leave room for interruption by need. The best teaching sessions sometimes end with a hole in the roof and a healed neighbour on the street. The point of doctrine is not to guard ceilings, it is to open access to the one the doctrine describes. There is a final tension we should not erase. The man's body was changed in a moment, many bodies are not. Yet forgiveness, offered first, remains available and decisive for every listener. We do not measure God's love by the timing of physical change, but by the settled generosity of the cross where forgiveness